get them on par and helping to spread that throughout the nation. So thank you for all that you do.
So, yeah, so we were able to raise almost $4,000 from the last event. So we just want to give the $105 that check based from our chapter.
That's incredible. Thank you. And I know the Storm Center is getting a big check, like a really big check. You need to know this one, the bank will.
That's right. All right, look this way for me, guys. Sorry, I'll be quick. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Phoebe. And a flag in the background while the incentive.
And I have to add, this man here, Eric, did a phenomenal job putting the satisfaction in person years past. Those of you that, but he put it together. The only drawback to the entire thing is stocks.
Who is that?
Colonel Milton's stock.
He's kidding.
You better check out the video.
We'll send him a copy of this meeting after.
Yeah.
And just one more thing, if I can say, Desert Financial is going to be the title sponsor again next year for 2022. So
Thank you, Gary.
So, one of the things that really makes being a member of the ASIS really exciting is the community outreach and volunteer work that we get to be involved with. When our community calls us and needs help, so many of our members are there. Dave Toon would come up here and join me, please. Yeah, sure, by all means. So there was a hate crime that took place at the George Washington Carver Museum earlier this year. Many of you may have been
it was actually December last year.
Okay.
I was on the news. George Washington Carver Museum. He's a ISIS south of KC. Anyway, idiots came along, raising slurs all over. Randy Lehman, Randy with ASIS, and at that time Mike Hitt. They got involved. Somebody, that was kind of what started this whole thing. Actually, sorry. And then I got Max involved. So, side of all of this, what are we going to be doing here? My company, and Premise One got volunteer, put up 5 cameras. Max put together painting aspect. I'm not a technical person, so I ended up meeting, but all the guys, volunteers, got 5 cameras up, got one entire full length pole down there painted volunteers. So I just want to thank them. Here's time company at Trail, donated a lift, access camera, my company, security, guys, gray bar, computer, cable, things they go in cable, Premise One, all.
So this year's scholarship recipient was Em Saunders. She is involved in the Eagle Eye Committee with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And she wants to get involved with the FBI and counterterrorism. We received several recipients. Jerry Carter, who wasn't able to join us today with Anderson Security, she compiled those, and as a board, we voted, and she won the scholarship. So we look forward to seeing Emma at a meeting with us sometime this fall in person. All right, Kurt Luther, Stephanie Switz, Cheryl, if you would, please come up here and join us. So this was a great event. This was truly our first in-person event of the year. Not a bi-monthly meeting, but it was our spring golf tournament, and I'll let them tell you about everything that took place there.
This is actually the second year that I was a golf chair. You guys probably missed the first official, most successful Zoom golf tournament we had. I won that one. This year, we held it together. I had a terrific team with me this year. Supported the board and a few volunteers, and had a great time. We were out there, beautiful weather, and support of our friend, I consider a personal friend. The Sojourner Center has been a recipient of many of our golf tournaments and community outreach events, and it's just always special to be able to give to them. We always end up trying. But I'm going to let you tell a little bit about the Sojourner Center for those that don't know. One of the largest women, children, and family domestic violence shelters in this region.
And pets.
And pets.
You guys don't need me here anymore.
Pretty good.
You know it, absolutely. I've met so many wonderful people in this room since I started with you, maybe close to 4 years ago now. So when Kurt says friends, I feel that way. My heart is just full. Hearing everything that you've done, you support us, but everyone else you've supported here, it's just amazing. The work that you were able to do in the heart in this room, I can't express it enough. I thought Dave was going to have me time instead of the other one. For those of you who don't know, we're a domestic violence program, Sojourner Center. Domestic violence program in the community. We've been in the community for more than 40 years. By the nature of our community, we adjust and change as needed, and we are expanding our mission. Those are probably the first ones I told, and it's still a work in progress, but to also accept victims of sexual assault as well as human trafficking. So there's so much work out there that still needs to be done. We do it, you know this, because of you. We can't do it without you. That's the truth. We did a little bit of math a minute ago, and everything you did in this one event, you are providing a safe space for 80 nights for somebody.
Thank you so much for being here as always, but I want to also mention all the sponsors we had during this event. Some came in from out of state. The whole sponsors had opportunities to actually present in some of their services that we provide in the security industry, but all in all, we couldn't have done it without you. Our next tournament is coming here October 29th at the Papago course here in town, so look forward to that planning event off here in the next so you'll all be getting notification of that. As a result of our collective efforts, we were able to raise some money, and you are right, it is not cash out of the bank.
That's a little one too.
But you did get the cool big check, so congratulations, a little over $3,000.
Good job, Andy.
This is beautiful.
You wanna
Thanks,
take a look?
guys.
She took it back. So we just hosted the Women in Security Committee. Unfortunately, it was dormant for a while, and then Jeannie Croft of Blacks in Security, she actually volunteered to be the committee chair this year. So we were getting our wheels spinning with some of the other committee members. Let's see, we have Katie, Diana Zellers, Danielle, of what we should do. So conversations with Women in Security, and it was in a happy hour format. Thank you for the gentleman who came out to the event to support us as well. And I believe, I don't know if the money was baked into that check that you gave Cheryl, yeah. So we had tickets on our website that were available for purchase, and the donations went to the our center. So thank you once again for always being our beneficiary. All right, so Raphael Nadar and Mr. Brad Zeller, Scott Barr, and Wayne Black, they have formed a tech panel, or tech panel committee. So that's going to be showcased at our next meeting. Raphael, do you want to say a few words about it?
Sure. As Lisa mentioned, where I come from originally, ASIS, and one thing we always did was sort of a tech panel, because you have the end user consultant, operator, what it look like when deciding what technology to install or to add to it, whatever that looks like. So it's going to be a panel. It's going to be about 30 minutes, I would say. And I have each side myself and every gentleman on the board.
Yeah, one of the consultants, Mr. Wayne Black, their security 101 is actually flying. So this is kind of piggybacking off of the theme of our former chair, Mr. Rich Wilson, of the convergence of cyber and tech with physical security. All right, so I love this slide that Felipe put together. So this is so we've only been doing spring golf tournaments, but we want to bring these back. So now we're doing our fall golf tournament. And as you can see, the date of October 29th, it falls just a few days before Halloween. So costumes are encouraged. They're optional, but encouraged. Also in today's raffle, we're giving away some stuff for the golf tournament too. So I encourage you to participate. So Detective Dan and Mike Q, if you'd like to stand up. So Dan, so last year due to COVID, we weren't able to host the Southwest Security Conference. This year, Dan was able to lock down the date of November 5th for us at Arizona State University. Go Devils in the Memorial Union. So we have a ballroom there.
Oh, too soon.
What's that?
No ASU football, too soon.
Go Devils! Go Devils! And then Mike Q, he fucking volunteered to moderate the event. So we do need speakers, so subject matter experts, thought leaders from security, as well as sponsors too. All right, everyone, please give a round of applause for So I'm going to do Mr. Penzone's welcome. So Sheriff Paul Penzone, he has a combined 30 years of law enforcement and public safety experience. His resume includes distinguished 21-year career with the Phoenix Police Department, with 7 years dedicated to the department's nationally recognized silent witness program, which focuses on solving cold cases and apprehending dangerous fugitives. After retiring from Phoenix, Sheriff Penzone spent time as a vice president with Child Help, a 60-year-old nonprofit dedicated to the treatment and prevention of child abuse. He also owned and operated a successful private security firm that focused on issues such as school and workplace safety, threat mitigation, internal investigations, and comprehensive security. Under Sheriff Penzone's leadership, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, MCSO, is committed to a mission of ethical, effective, and impactful law enforcement and public safety. The sheriff and his staff are also focused on programs and initiatives to help promote partnerships and trust between their office and our communities. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office operates in an area nearly the size of Vermont, and it's the primary or supporting law enforcement agency for a population of more than 4 million residents. The MCSO's jails process and house felony and most misdemeanor intakes for the county, with over 100,000 intakes on an annual basis. Wow. The sheriff is a member of the Arizona Sheriff's Association, the Mayor's County Sheriff's Association, Internal Association of Chiefs of Police, the Department of Homeland Security Regional Advisory Council, and he also serves on the board of the New Life Domestic Violence Center, Child Help, as well as the Phoenix Symphony. Sheriff Penzone attended Cortez High School in Phoenix, where his interests in law began while he was serving as a volunteer bailiff with the County Justice Court. Paul then went on to study criminal justice at Glendale Community College and Northern Arizona University. The sheriff is a graduate from the FBI National Executive Institute, NEA.
was recommended files aren't read. I fall asleep myself listening to it. I'm not sure I did those things that you said, but thank you. That's the look of like, holy what, I'm the chair. Thank you guys for having me. I always enjoy coming and speaking with you, speaking to experts or colleagues in the same field. I really wasn't given any guidance on what to talk about. So I'm going to do my best to talk about what I think is important, but really, if there's a Q&A, which I'm assuming there is a little bit of Q&A, that's when we'll get to the meat and potatoes. Or you have a question. Was it Ken or Dan that gave the Diamondback tickets?
Dan.
Then you couldn't go for the Suns, huh? You know Diamondback? Just checking. Our Diamondbacks aren't doing too well. Hope for the best. I want to talk about something because with Angela here and the generosity that you've shown and just the importance of being supportive of those in our industry, understanding that the trials and tribulations oftentimes there's injury, loss of life, and that impact carries on. So your generosity to 100 Club goes a long way. Since becoming the sheriff, so when I was with Phoenix PD, I did the math as I left. 22 officers died in line of duty in my 22 years. And in the last year as a sheriff of Maricopa County, we saw 10 employees die from COVID. Just prior to that, we lost a detention officer, the first one in the office who was killed in line of duty in jails. So it is, I always tell everybody, the most important thing that we do in law enforcement, or one of the highlights, is when you swear in. But one of the most important things that we do is make sure we show respect to those families who have lost loved ones. So no one that's in an office wants to hand a flag over to a family. But when we have to do that, they need to understand what's different in that moment. They're with them. Now, Angela's on both ends of the spectrum. She has lost her spouse in the line of duty, and now she cares for those who have lost spouses. And that is a heavy burden, so your support for her organization and law enforcement goes a long way. And I kind of want to dovetail into what I want to talk about, if you don't mind, with just last week. I don't expect that anyone, maybe other than a few of us, know the name Gino New. Gino New, 25, I think, 26 years old, Phoenix police officer, had been on the job maybe a year and a half. So we just attended his funeral last week. I knew nothing about it. But as always, the Phoenix Police Department and other agencies do a phenomenal job of showing respect to our heroes. And when I use the word hero, what is heroic? I don't know. I mean, you can think of a specific act that is heroic, but I don't know that you can really encapsulate what it means to be a hero based off of circumstance. I do think that anybody in this profession right now, just by mere commitment to want to make a difference, definitely puts you on the scale. But what I took from the funeral, aside from just the support that was there, not just industry support, but community support, during a time, and I think you'd all agree, it's a tough time to be in public safety, right? I mean, the opinions of many, the vitriol that comes from a small percentage, but is often loud, isn't always pro law enforcement. But as I sat there and I listened to them talk, and there were many speakers, and I don't know, I will tell you this, I think the hardest thing to do is to speak at a funeral. Although I've seen people who really screw up speaking at a wedding. That's a joke, so come on. But the speakers were amazing. And when they spoke about Gino, and I just want to get some context, he did not run into a bank robbery, get involved in a shootout. He wasn't in a domestic violence situation where we look at it and we say, inherent dangers, tragic, heroic. No, Gino was driving in the middle of the night when somebody doing about 100 miles an hour T-boned him and killed him. Could happen to anybody in this room at any time, anybody out in the streets, right? So when you have a memorial service, circumstances like that, we understand why we view him, the sacrifice is heroic. But not once with any of the speakers that I hear them talk about what he did in the job. Everybody talked about what kind of a person. Military, nurse, teacher, police officer. 4 careers that I dare you to argue with me are some of the most selfless careers in our society. They talked about the impact that he had on his nieces and nephews, how loving he was and supportive. They talked about what he did for the family, how he was always the one leading by example to do more for others than he received. So when I talk about heroism, yeah, profession sometimes aligns us with that, but nothing makes me more proud than to hear of the character of a person in our profession by far shadowing what they do in our profession. Because if we're going to survive in the face of the criticism that we face, it is going to be based off of our character more so than our actions. Our actions are part of the job, right? And we are expected to be very good at it. Otherwise, we shouldn't be in the profession. But as humans, we're flawed. Now, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But there's a heck of a lot more acceptance when mistakes are due to good intentions with maybe shortcomings versus malice that's put a stain on all of us. So when I speak of Gino New and I reference Angela in the 100 Club, I do it with great gratitude because the sacrifice in this profession, I think, weighs as strong as any there is. People need to know we're going to stay with them through that. So that's where I want to kind of dovetail what I want to talk about briefly, and it is, I touched on it, criticism we face right now. You know, just recently I took a public stance, and I stay out of politics as much as possible. I took a public stance for some legislation that was being passed that would have required every agency involved in a deadly force incident to have their case investigated by another agency. Now, philosophy, I tell you, that makes sense to me. There's always a problem when we investigate our own because there's always that scrutiny. Are you biased? Are you, subjective? Are you partisan in this effort? Or can we trust the transparency? So it was not the philosophy that I opposed. What I opposed in legislation was there was no thought put into it. Because if today you say, I don't think NCSO does a good job investigating crime or investigating shootings that they're involved in, clear. Then how tomorrow can you say suddenly we trust them when they investigate Phoenix's shootings and Phoenix investigates theirs? Because I'm sure a lot of people say, I don't trust either way. That's quid pro quo. You're taking care of them and taking care of you. So when I visit this issue, the reason I opposed it is because I believe it's necessary for us to evolve to a place where everyone in the community feels that if we are evaluating ourselves, they can trust the outcome. But to do that, we have to be comprehensive because we have not just a criminal investigation, we have an administrative investigation. Boys have rights. There's different policies in every agency. There's bandwidth. No disrespect intended. I came from Phoenix, but if tomorrow you said, oh, I want your agency to take Phoenix shootings and I want them to take yours, that's not a fair trade-off because now I'm taking 50 shootings and they're taking 5. So the reason I want to bring this up is because law enforcement, to survive, to really thrive, and to be desirable again for the next generation, because that's our biggest struggle, recruitment, we have to show we're deserving. And not because we're not doing great work, but right now the narrative conflicts with that. So I've been working with the 10 chiefs of the 10 largest agencies for us to build a model that will be sustainable so that the community who has concerns will feel better about how we do this. And again, that's kind of a side note, but it brings me to where I want to be, which is, we stood here a little earlier and pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, right? In my opinion, the two most powerful words in the U.S. Constitution are freedom and order. Because one doesn't exist without the other. We talk about being a nation of freedom, right? Freest nation in the world. But do we truly have pure freedom? No, there are certain restrictions on our freedom that we sacrifice through order in order to be free, right? Because order protects our rights in many ways. Order protects our freedom in many ways. But you don't have 100% freedom because there has to be laws to protect who we are. Laws protect citizenship, right? Because without laws, then we don't have citizenship. Order issues. You don't have freedom of speech. You don't have laws to protect those who want to speak freely. You don't have freedom to bear arms unless there is order to ensure that those who violate the law can maybe forfeit that right is intended to protect those who are deserving still fight for that right. So one of the biggest challenges we face, I get this question all the time, is what do you fear most? Was it terrorism? Earlier today we had an arrest of a serial shooter, shooting out of the streets on roadways. What is your biggest fear? Was it terrorism? Is it technological issues? No, for me it's recruitment. Prior to COVID, so when I took the office, I had 3,500 employees. When I took the office, we had about 13% vacancy ratio. That's a lot of people. We cut that down to 3% before COVID. Couldn't run academies during COVID. Couldn't recruit. Who wanted to go to work in a jail when there's a COVID outbreak? But we shot back up to 12%. So now when we go out there and we try to recruit, we have to rebrand ourselves. Because what did we see during COVID? Probably one of the most trying years we've ever had. We had a lot of protests, didn't we? Matter of fact, one of the companies here, we put our fence line. We had a lot of public unrest. We had all the political issues that rose during a time when we were dealing with public health issues. So when I talk about the future of this profession, our profession, collectively, here's where I want to close with your questions. I don't believe we are going to survive and be successful if we don't commit to the fact that we have to put character, like Gino knew, as the defining attribute in everything that we do. We have to be good at our job, we have to be ethical, we have to be well trained, we have to be professional. But every engagement that we have with anyone in any circumstance comes down to whether they are deserving or not, how we treat people with respect and how we define our character through our actions. Because every time we fail, I tell my employees this, we defy and we undermine the reputation of the Gino News of the world. We give the ultimate sacrifice. It's our job to carry their legacy. And carrying their legacy, we have to rise above it all. Respect isn't something that you get. Like when I come to the door, it's nice everybody claps for me and you see this and you're like, well, who's the sheriff? We got a few votes, so we got to find it to him. I mean, I know the math, like I think I was 56, 44, so like this much of the room didn't vote for him. But all of you did. But at the end of the day, this is a privilege and a blessing. And no matter who I interact with, I know I am fortunate because I get a chance to represent and speak on behalf of those who truly do the job. But if I don't lead with respect and gratitude, you're going to have an impression my organization, men and women who sacrifice. I do them a disservice if I'm not giving respect, whether I expect it in return or not, because it's not something you get, it's something you give. It's something that reflects your values, who you are, and what you stand for. And when I talk to new recruits, I say, I don't care if it's the person in jail who tells you what they're going to do with your mom when they get out, or they spit on you or anything else. If you let them break you and you act as they're behaving, they've won. But if you rise above it, because we carry the authority, the responsibility to be better. Where's the authority come from? This is a question I was asked when I was young many moons ago. Like, guys, what was your name again? Stephanie. I was a lot younger with no gray hair back then. I don't know what I was in store for. But I had been an officer for 5 minutes when a friend of the family, older gentleman who was a doctor, said, hey, I have a question for you, Paul. Where's your authority come from? I'm fresh out of the academy, and I said, Constitution, Arizona Revised Statutes. Cool, they're telling me that I have this power. He said, you're correct, you're wrong. Your power comes from the people you serve. Because those documents are meaningless if tomorrow the people say they don't respect them, they don't respect the treaty, to the extension of that authority. So even the homeless person you interact with who, is a troublemaker you see every day, the person you're putting handcuffs on, whoever it is, they're the ones who have given you the privilege to exert that authority. And as soon as you defy it, you're no longer entitled to keep it. When we talk about respect, when we talk about these attributes, we should be deserving of the privilege. It's not an entitlement. And we have a work cut out for us. Because in the face of the criticism, in the face of the protests, of things like abolish or defund or whatever it may be, if we don't rise above it and we behave in response to it, we're going to lose. And if we lose, everyone loses. Because even the people who curse you are the very ones who will praise you when you come to save their day, because they are the loved ones in harm's way. And that's probably the most important thing we do. The person who despises us most, that even those folks are deserving of our greatest effort and our sacrifice, because we get an authority that is a privilege that represents everything about that. If you don't believe it, then you're wrong. So, I'll pause here about this. But I'll tell you, I think everybody says, do you get caught up in it? Being the sheriff, wherever, I don't know, because my wife is absolutely the boss. I walk to the door and say, I don't give a shit how many stores got to go outside. And my parents named me Paul. They named me sheriff, right? So I don't house money. I never expected to be a sheriff the first time, and you guys, I fooled it for a second one. This much after this. But I don't house money, so I just want to do the best job that I can do while I'm here on behalf of others, because I have 2 sons, and they're 28 and 34. And when they're kind enough to give me some grandkids to get to work, I want to make sure that my grandchildren and their children grow up in a world where there are people who want to put on the badge and the uniform in every capacity, private or public, and serve others for public safety. I want them to look at those men and women and be grateful because the profession has a reputation, but there is appreciation. That's our responsibility. Because we got handed off to some pretty good conditions, so we got to shine it back up and get it back. Right? So thank you guys for listening. I'm happy to talk to you. Questions? No, it's off the table.
But on your street review, getting a slate.
Yeah, so what we, and please, I'll say keep in the room, but that'd be silly for me to say. Where we are now is we're kind of looking at two models. The first model is, relatively a task force where what we do is have a rotation in certain like Central, East, and West Valley. Central Valley really is dominated by the issues that Phoenix has, again, just because the population, but Phoenix isn't any different, just they have a greater demand. So we have to get some of the larger agencies to address the Phoenix volume, and then we'll break the rest of the valley without a rotation. But we have to incorporate some aspect of, I don't call it civilian oversight, but we'll call it civilian support, because transparency. So when I opposed that legislation, my argument was this: you can do all the X's and O's in the world, but at the end of the day, it comes down to accountability and transparency. Because one agency will say, I'm putting the body worn camera video out in 3 days. Another one will say, I'm not putting it out at all. Prosecutor's office has different opinions. So we have to have a bridge that takes us from what we are doing and being the best at it to ensuring that the public receives enough information in the appropriate time frame without jeopardizing prosecution or process. And to do that, we have to have, upon liaisons, ambassadors, whatever it is, people that represent the community, that has a trust of people that when they speak, it's not coming from, oh, that's Sheriff Penfield protecting the town. No, we have that representation. So we're working on that model. And the other model we talked about is, some other states just have a Bureau of Investigations, where it is an independent body that falls either under the AG or the governor's office. They take all police shootings, and now suddenly you don't have that conflict. Everything's been removed. But that comes down to taxpayer dollars, funding, and appropriate build out. So we're just we're trying to be pragmatic. We're looking for a sustainable solution, not a piece of legislation that says no funding, no design, no nothing, but figure it out. And no disrespect to the legislators, other than I would tell you, it bugs the heck out of me when any law is written that relates to law enforcement without talking to law. They don't agree with us, but at least get our opinion on how it will either be effective, ineffective, or things that are needed within it. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah.
Who else?
Carla, the bartender, when she found out that you were here today, she freaked out and she was like, when he won, I called his headquarters. I knew I wouldn't get through to him, but I did call, so if you would mind on your way out.
I think security removed her on the way in. She got close proximity.
Does she have a warrant?
She's on a list.
Yeah. Thanks, come on, we're out. We're talking about something that's important.
Without dating either one of us, sir, we're about the same age. We both entered law enforcement about the same time. I can remember when you were kind enough to come to our security conference, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I remember you speaking about, back when you and I started, we had thousands of applicants for a few positions. Now, back even 4 or 5 years ago, the tide had turned. Now it was, few applicants for thousands of positions. Now COVID and events of last year, what are your challenges now? Are they even more so harder to recruit these people? Even once you do, when you get in the academy, what is the message that's now to the academy about her character? Or what you were talking about earlier? Because I remember those days of writing that character. Has that message changed at all, or how is it?
Well, I think it's changed, but it's changed from the aspect that it was always there. But I think there was a time when this profession felt like a calling, like I would describe it. Now suddenly we got people like the Kardashians, and it's like, do I want to drive a Bentley or do I want to drive a beat-up police car and get paid, peanuts? So we have to inspire people to believe that purpose matters. You're not going to get rich in law enforcement, but you will get rich in the moments that you have with the people no one knows about, right? When you interact with somebody and you made a difference in their life. So when we try to prove, you're right, I tested down at, Civic Plaza, wherever it was at the time, there were 1,000 people for 50 jobs. Now I have an academy class with 40 seats, and if I get 20 in there, I'm happy. So recruitment has become more difficult. I think some of this generation, I don't think that people view job opportunities as careers anymore. I think a lot of the younger adults kind of see things in segments throughout their life. So we have to find a way to connect with them on their level. And I'll give you an example. We started a program a few years ago called Pathways to Justice. And we got a grant, and what we did, and we worked in partnership with DPS and Phoenix PD, we identified the zip codes with the lowest economic financial support. And please don't, judge on this initially. What we were trying to do is we were trying to connect with communities that were divided or had a broken relationship with law enforcement to start with. And usually that's where it happens. It happens in communities with the most crime, the least economic support, all those issues. That's just reality. So we went into those communities and we spoke to the teachers and we said, do you have some people you'd like to recommend for a 3-week summer camp? And we paid these young men and women, the classes were like 30 or 40 kids, and we paid them $10 an hour to come and just really go through a summer camp of law enforcement. Talking about the Constitution, talking about the different agencies, talking about the jail system. Taught them why government/law enforcement law, as I did freedom, exists and what their place was within it. And when I walked in the first day, so I was walking through the introduction, it was like an 8th grade dance. Girls on one side, boys on the other. It was the kids on one side, law enforcement on the other, and I had to force them to dance together. But then when you go to the last day, suddenly they're dating. They're looking up, these kids are looking up to our employees are looking at these kids like, just like my kid. And they're like, wow, he's just like my uncle, my aunt, whatever it is. It became human. It became a human relationship, and suddenly the fact that you were in law enforcement was the secondary or third issue. It wasn't leading it. And the same thing. So what we did was we tried to change hearts and minds by getting them to see we're just people with families, go to church, play sports, whatever the heck it is, but we have a job to care for a community. So when you see us, in the same way that people don't want to be judged by the color of their skin, we should be judged by the color of our uniform. And in doing that, we saw, because these were kids that were sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school, and the majority of their experiences had always been kind of negative, their family members themselves. By the 3rd year, we saw kids coming that had either been in the program or just coming out of the program applying for jobs in our agency. So all we did was we tried to change the dynamic of the relationship to be successful. But I'll also tell you it was a Trojan horse, because what I saw from my employees was a different attitude. Because when you go out on the streets, especially you work gangs or something, you see a 14-year-old telling you to go F yourself, not exactly a strong relationship, right? But suddenly we're learning that kids communicate differently, they feel a certain way about us for certain circumstances, and if we find a way to overcome that, we can maybe win some over, and then our jobs are a heck of a lot easier. So that's part of the answer to your question, but the other part is we have to help people understand and feel good about doing something that you don't get immediate gratification for. That's not going to be on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, you're not going to be popping a selfie. It is, I went and did something good for a complete stranger, and I can walk away feeling good about myself, and that's a far better legacy than, trying to be cool and having however many likes on a post. This is a story I'd like to share. I'm long-winded on everything, but you guys asked me to come, so it's tough. Probably 10 minutes after this picture, I'm a new sheriff, I don't know the ropes, I don't even bother, I'm like, I'm in security detail, because I haven't run into the bartender yet, so that was I go to this event, and I'm kind of deer in the headlights, right? I'm overwhelmed, because everybody's looking at me, but I don't realize, it's because I'm the sheriff. And as I'm in this room, and actually it was the Chinese New Year, I remember exactly what it was, I walk in, and then I turn, and I bump into the young man, like, dumped in it. A little slight thing, and I was knocking over, so I grabbed him, like, I apologize, you okay? Forgive me, I wasn't paying attention. And kind of go along my way. Well, a couple of days later, my public information officer says, hey, Sheriff, I'm going to show you something. Check this out. Pulls up, I don't know, Facebook, Instagram, I don't know what the heck it was. But there's a picture. The kid's like this, I kid you not. He sits down in his chair, and he snaps a selfie with me in the background. And he posts, isn't it cool that the new sheriff bumped into me but took a moment to apologize? So when I talk to my employees, I say, you know what, when you put this badge on this uniform, there is no such thing as insignificant. Because you represent something greater that people have an opinion of, better or worse. So I see that as, I was just raised that way, right? That's not a big significant moment for me. I just wiped the kid off, sorry I bumped into you. But for him, it's extremely significant because the sheriff, not Paul Penzone, just showed respect to him over something trivial, right? So I tell my employees, every time you go out there, whether you're writing a ticket, whether you're talking to somebody in whatever circumstances, whether you're walking to Circle K to get a Coke, how you treat somebody will be a significant interaction with them, no matter how trivial it feels to you. So seize on that opportunity every time. It's a lot of pressure. But if you want to put the badge and the uniform on, embrace it. That's like this. As I'm the sheriff, if she wants to go take a selfie with me or whatever, prior to arresting her, I'll knock all this out. Because it matters, right? And the next time she interacts with law enforcement, same thing. How many of you, I heard earlier you were talking about 100,000 people going, or 100,000 people going to the jail. I was waiting for somebody to raise their hands, like, I was one of those 100,000. So I bet everybody in this room can think of a time you got pulled over for speeding or whatever it was. Okay, this room you probably don't speed, but if you did, if the officer treated you with respect and gave you a ticket, you left thinking, I should have slowed down. But if they treated you with disrespect and didn't give you the ticket, it stuck with you. So we all collectively are in a profession where every interaction is significant for someone. I don't even know where that went from your question. But I'm the sheriff. I can do this. And they're like, no more questions. Get them out of here. Any other questions?
Hey, Paul, can you talk a little bit about the coordination of the department, planning for protests, especially when you know they very well will turn into big up?
Yeah, considerable. And I'll use. I'm going to share something because it's the good and the bad, and it's not the bad because necessarily an agency did anything wrong, but it is circumstantial. So one of the early BLM protests that was going on downtown, we collectively all talked. We got the Active Center and everything like that, but we knew the robust part of the protest was going to be in the downtown Phoenix area. And Phoenix had the biggest burden, but it was DPS, Phoenix, and MCSO that were kind of looking at the entire landscape and saying, okay, what properties do we have first and foremost, and then where do we have common ground, and then what do we need? Because it doesn't matter how many protests you see, DPS and MCSO will be part of it. The jails are ours, so I assure you, I have a couple hundred people in the parking garages with, arrest buses and everything, because if there's a mass arrest, not only are we going to support the enforcement side, but we're taking incarcerations. And the same thing like with DPS, they'll bring the field forces out, they have to worry about getting on the freeways, so even though Phoenix is the elephant, we're right there with them. So at that time, we looked at it and we said, we're going to over-prepare and hope for the best as opposed to under-prepare. And we talked about everything. So I called the National Guard and I said, can you loan us some bodies? Not armed, not enforcement, but we want to bury them in some of the government buildings because if God forbid either we're understaffed, they overrun us, or it's a space that we're not able to assign right away because we don't see it as a threat, we need the last line of defense. Absolutely, Paul, here you go. Here's 50 bodies. So I put bodies in every government building that was downtown. I say every county building. Then fence lines. Some people go, like, it's overkill. Why are the fence lines? This isn't, whatever, third world country. I got news for you. When you see a couple hundred people out there with frozen bottles of water and firecrackers and all kinds of stuff, yeah, it is potentially a third world country. So you have to have physical barriers, you have to have psychological barriers, and you have to have people. So we put fence line up all around it. And then we talked with Phoenix and said, they're coming at you. We know that, so where do you want us? We'll be wherever, and we'll take certain streets. DPS, the same thing. So Phoenix took the brunt of it. That's where everybody was headed. They had to be out front with all their gear, firing gas, everything else. You know what we did? Because we were not the center of attention. I'm a block away. Like, I'm looking out of my window, and I was there till 1 in the morning that night, looking at everything. I see the federal court building, I see Phoenix PD, and I say, there ain't no way in hell I'm going out, and I'm kidding. But we did the opposite. I had 200 people in the building as that third line of defense, and I turned the lights off. I said, we are going to sit here in the dark because people are drawn to movement and light, and if they don't see us, they're not coming here. So we're better prepared that if we need to send bodies out Phoenix, we're not depleting them in our own building. So we saw some damage, we saw a lot of arrests, we saw issues, but we sure as hell didn't see Seattle report, did we? Now, conversely, and I say this again, circumstances, I called Scottsdale that day, a buddy of mine was assistant chief, I said, you need any bodies, because we're looking at all this chatter going on, and we want to make sure you got what you need. And I said, in addition, we have National Guard people that can send them over there. And he said, no, I think we got it under control because we're not confident that it's going to evolve. We all know that it did. So here's the thing that most people don't realize, though. At the same time, because there's never one ball in the air, when that protest was going on, it was a fire on Cape Creek, or Caribou. And I had a whole district doing evacuations and traffic control. And when they got off after working 14 hours, they were headed back. I heard people like, I got CPP, and all those initials. I'm SOB and POS. When I called my guys, I said, guess what? Your day just got longer because I'm diverting you to Scottsdale because we can get things back under control. So we do our best, and I will tell you, there's Frank Milstead when he was a colonel, Jerry Williams, me, Eston Silver. we all cut our teeth together. We all went to things we do. Now, we have a great relationship with all of our college from other agencies too, but it's pretty easy to call somebody you've known for 30 years and say, hey, what do you think? So we have a very, very healthy working relationship in Arizona with the majority of our law enforcement agencies. I'll give some credit to the fact that, yeah, we were just lucky enough to all put on the same uniform for the majority of our career.
Paul, I want to say thank you. My fiance and I are transfers don't live in Arizona, we're not born and raised. So our first 3 months living in the state, we lived in Fashion Square, Scottsdale, right on the corner. So that riot broke out, and I am a not just a born and raised Hokie girl, good Hokie, the flag waving girl, but I also, my entire family, my brothers, my dad, my uncles are all just drug task force, sheriffs, and deputies. So I've been trained on how you react to emergencies. I work in security, so I've been through a few of these. And I woke up out of the dead of sleep, trying to put that car stop down at night, trying to break in and attack us. Our parking garage was vandalized, and we live right there on the corner. So, and I just moved to this state. I knew nobody. I had no allies. We had no resources. We have to sit. You have to sit and wait. You draw. You keep the lights drawn. You keep the lights out. But this is an open concept design from an architectural class. So you're sitting down. You're watching helicopters fly over. You're watching tear gas fly. You're watching officers put their life on the line. That very well might not make it home because somebody's upset enough. You did 40 minutes, not just the frozen bottle of water, but their bare fist. Not just businesses that were destroyed, livelihoods and lost, but just genuine fear. I rarely feel genuine fear. Usually because my adrenaline's running destruction so much, I don't have time to realize I should be scared, which might be a good thing, or it's just ignorance and I'll die from it. But in that moment, we were woken up out of the bed of sleep, had no idea any of this was going on. We had a friend that was caught in the peril of that because they have to be out as far as and these massive people running their way, and now they're caught in the midst of chaos. And at that point, law enforcement and people trying to get us under control, there's no way to identify who's the offender and who's just caught in the mix. And he was able to make it to us safely, get into our apartment, but had it not been for the response of law enforcement and the outpouring of just volunteers that came to try to rally together, honestly, I would not have felt safe as I did. I had a newfound respect for law enforcement after that experience. We were up we stayed up all night at that point, and at 7 a.m. the next morning we were out there helping with class and like that. But there were still officers that were off duty at that point, had been off duty for hours and still there helping, and consoling people and acting as counselors and therapists. That takes people that have a passion for this and have a heart for the job, and not people facing teaching. And if they are, they're facing the wrong one, right? So I can't say thank you enough for somebody that's a visitor feeling to Arizona, having gone through that experience. I have a newfound respect for law enforcement and what you guys do. Because in that moment, I was like, I don't know what to do here other than this. But me going out there is going to contribute to this toning down. I cannot do anything to help them. All I can do is stay put. But watching and hear is someone's going to break in and harm us. They're going to destroy, what we've worked so hard to build. You guys really helped restore us peace. And we knew there were fires going on around the place too. People were spread. So seeing emergency management respond and just be there, even when they didn't have to be, spoke volumes and love just to stay. Thank you.
We're especially now more than ever, we're in a profession where we are expected, you can't miss big, you can't miss small, meaning if you under-prepare, Scottsdale Fashion Square happens, it's kind of scrutiny. If you show up because you over-prepare and you overreact, even though you're doing it for the right reasons to try to, because again, if you want to combat force more quickly, you can show force and stabilize it, but less likely it's going to expand. What do we hear every time we over-respond? Oh, it's militaristic, why so much, why are you pointing guns right now? So, aim small, miss small. We have to be spot on, but I'm a believer that always be over-prepared. Just don't respond with overdoings. Be very, very tactful and pragmatic. And that was one of those lessons learned, but two critical things that were not good came from it. First and foremost, a bunch of bad people realized that if you rush hard enough, you can knock down the castle wall and get inside. And it kind of reinforced the bad behavior. And then good people suddenly went, hold on a second, if they can do that, then they're coming to my house. I can't even calls I field that were like, are they coming to my house to, loot and rape and everything else? I'm like, they're Arizona, so pretty much everybody carries a gun, so I can't wait to see a person who comes to a stranger's door and wants to come in, take a 357 around the forehead. But psychologically, people were broken. People were fearful because we never expected to see a crowd overrun a mall. And then on the funny side of it, there is one. I'm at the EOC. We got drones and I'm watching all the stuff. I'm seeing it unfold in Fashion Square. I'm on the phone doing all kinds of things. And my wife calls me. I'm like, all right, you're tucked in, right? You're safe at home, the boys and everything. She's like, no, honey, we're driving around Old Town. It's crazy. She's an Italian from the Bronx, so she's got her own mentality. I'm like, I'm trying to keep the community safe. You're not going to worry about my wife. Can you just go home, please? She has a business in the area. She thought she wanted to make sure it was safe. I'm like, any other questions I can ask? You're like, keep your day job, not the 20 ball.
Chiefs, can you comment about your on-site immigration issue and your interagency support of Border Patrol?
There's nothing I won't comment on. Sure, you're in for better or for worse. So we're under 2 federal court orders, so we are prohibited from being involved in immigration enforcement. And to put that into context, if my deputy stops somebody on the street or they're involved in an investigation, we are prohibited from asking for status or any documents, and we are prohibited from calling Border Patrol to the scene. Now I do, and I've taken this head on, so I'll say I face criticism, but a small percentage. I keep ICE in the jail. So they have a station, so every single person, now 100,000 people that go through our jail system all get interviewed by ICE. If they determine that someone is entering unlawfully, they want to take custody of them to bring them to federal court magistrate and immigration judge, we turn them over immediately upon release so they can do so. And there's some folks activists primarily like, that's wrong, you shouldn't. I'm like, no, what's wrong is breaking the laws. And again, I talk about citizenship has no value if you don't work to protect it and enforce those laws. Does that mean I'm okay with separating children from families? And do I believe that this issue is not new? It's been going on for far too long. We've been kicking a can down the road. Yeah, we got to get straight out. We have to have a secure border. We have to address the points of entry. We have to focus on sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, criminal element. And then we need to have resources and ways for good people to come into the country lawfully and pursue citizenship or jobs. But within the controls that I have, we support ICE. I swear in all of the ICE and Border Patrol agents every year so they can enforce state law. We do have some folks assigned to a task force so that if Border Patrol is involved in investigation leads to drug seizures or things like that, then we take care of those elements. But beyond that, and those who are paying attention, the judge doesn't care who the sheriff is. He like that pound of flesh or thing over on my back. I had a nice brown drum before I became sheriff, but somebody fights that. I think, yes. So I don't want to go to jail, but yeah, when we can help, I do, and I just make sure that we'll be involved. What else? I get it first off the bat.
The aspiration to be
He has to be on sheriff, get a better paid job. Any suggestions?
Join ASIS.
I sit in the room every day, like when we have meetings. I'm like, everybody's room, it's more than me. That works for me. As a matter of fact, my security detail, those people are not. Obviously, I'm not in it for the money, but very kind. Full transparency. I'm very much a man of faith, and I just kind of feel like wherever I'm at in the stage of my life, and I see an opportunity to do something that I feel has purpose and value, then I'll consider it. But I think if I start worrying about what I want to do or where I want to go, then I'm not focused on where I'm at and what I need to do. So I was fortunate to be elected again. My wife said, "That's back to work and go do video." I'll say it louder.
The time. Speak your truth.
I was doing it. People go, boomerang. Do you ever want to say the wrong thing because then people have dirt on you? I'm like, there's so much dirt on me out there.
I did boomerang those, so you kind of have to.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir. You have a question?
I'm just curious if you had to deal with any of the push back on that.
So early on, I hear more often than anything people go, "Hey, thanks for not being on the news." And I'm like, I'm happy to not be on the news, thank you. But I was doing a news conference for some issue, I can't remember what it was, and during the news conference somebody said, "How do you feel when you defund the police?" And I said, it's ridiculous. Because defund the police, in my opinion, it's an emotional response to be punitive to law enforcement because you're not happy about something. But when you say defund the police, to me, I look at my budget and I go, okay, now you took dollars out, so do I take out tasers? Do I take out internal affairs? Do I take out training? Because it's a tangible item. So if you believe that law enforcement needs to be better, then we determine where the flaws are and how to improve on them. And when you talk about the budget is, what is a job, and do you want to pay for what it costs to do the job? And if not, it's like a risk assessment. You know, okay, what risk are you willing to take off the table because you can't fund to address that? But if you say you fund the police like that's going to make things better, then hell no, it's not. And I oppose it. I oppose it vehemently. I talk about the importance of oversight and accountability. I also talk about balance all the time. And it's kind of funny because running for sheriff obviously has a political alignment to it. You've got to be in a party to run. Prior to running for sheriff, I wasn't. I was an independent. I just stayed in my lane. I ran, and I say it with respect because the Democratic Party was very kind to support me under these terms. I said I'll never ever endorse unless it's somebody that I personally like, and I'll endorse them as Paul Penzo when I was a sheriff. And I won't get involved in any legislation outside of law enforcement based off of how I feel it should be addressed. So if you think that if I am elected that I'm going to do things politically to move a party, I'm not. Now, if I was in a different office, a different argument. But in this office, no. But as soon as I said that, Democratic sheriff opposes defund the police, and it was all over national news. All the conservative stations, will you do an interview, sheriff? Will you do an interview? I'm like, no, I'll pass, thank you. So it's ridiculous. It makes no sense. We have problems to solve, but taking money away is not solved. Amen, sheriff. What else?
How do you assess your planning? How do you maybe once it's signed, brought up, voted through the ranks? How do you assess your
Process-wise?
just process the
Yeah.
jobs that they do, functions that they're holding.
Yeah, I started off criticizing Diamondbacks, so I go back to baseball. It's like a baseball team, right? You gotta have the second baseman who's gonna play second base, you know, so people be really talented, but you gotta put them in the right spot to be successful so that they can achieve things that the organization can benefit. So when I first took the office, I interviewed, in law enforcement, you can only rise to the level of captain. Everything above that is an assignment, it's not a promotion. You know, so every captain is eligible to be chief, but when you're chief, I just move back down to captain if I feel like it's not the right fit. But what I did is I interviewed all these captains. I said, some were chiefs. Tell me about yourself. Tell me how you got here. Tell me what you want the organization. And again, this is just my leadership style. I was looking for this from them. I don't care how great you are. I don't want to hear about how you captured 55 homicide suspects all by yourself and took on a motorcycle gang. I want you to tell me what you do for other people. I want you to tell me what you want to see this organization to make it better. Like I want to see people that were talking about other servant leadership more so than, let me tell you how great I am. I hit 350 last season and no errors. Now, obviously, they have to have a skill set too, but I was looking to change the paradigm to one where it was always about succession. How do I develop the next person coming up? How do I facilitate success for others? At the same time, you got to have the high level of ethics and integrity. You got to lead by example. And there have been circumstances where I promoted people and they made human errors, but human errors that if they were in some other rank, there would be a consequence. They were demoted. You know, and there have been times where I shuffled the deck a little bit because I had one guy who was really talented and a hard worker, and he was an executive chief. It just wasn't the right role for him. I moved him over to a deputy chief position, and it's hard. It's hard for people because you want to treat others as you want to be treated, and it affects your pride. But I just had an honest conversation, like, listen, I got you at second base. I really need you, left field. For this reason, your skill set better fits this need. So I just try to be, everything is about peer-to-peer. I carry a level of responsibility, but it doesn't mean I should feel as though that how I interact with you is be predicated on some kind of where we are on the pecking order. And just try to build a team. But at the end of the day, when it goes south, there's only one name on the wedge in the newspaper, and that's mine. So I own it. Listen, at the end of the day, you don't like my decision, run for sheriff. You get to be a decision maker. But you also get the 200 feet lawsuits that come with it. So you want to jump in, water's one. So I'll take one more because it's probably time if anybody wants to ask a question. Otherwise, I'll close and go. Any other questions? Let me ask this first. Any other questions other than this gentleman who's asking good questions?
I promise.
Okay.
So during your tenure in law, how
Yeah, I think that tools and technology have been beneficial, but I also think that they've been to the detriment of human skill set. De-escalation, just because you understand people. And I remember early on, you want to prove yourself. I'm like, God, I'll go out there. He wants to fight. Let's go. And then also, I'm going to punch in the face. Let me figure out a better way to resolve this. I think that it required more instincts, human nature, just understanding people and trying to resolve that stuff. And I think a lot of the tools we put in young officers' deputies' hands now make them think that's supposed to be the first response, whether it's a taser or whatever the heck it is. And also, we do a lot of things as worst case scenarios, so the worst case bad. So I believe this, and this will be part of my close. I have nothing but admiration for everyone who's put the uniform on, the different skill sets and walks of life they come from. But I do think that law enforcement has to reevaluate what it means to law enforcement. Like right now, we got a 22-week course, police academy. And we put you out there and you go through FTO and everything else. Why is it 22 weeks? I don't know. It seems like the right number as we've crammed stuff in there. What we're teaching, why are we teaching that? Well, that's what we've always taught. Every once in a while we'll throw a Band-Aid on, like mental health, 4 hours, de-escalation, 2 hours, whatever. I think that we need to go back and say, in the last 10 years of law enforcement, what are we really spending our time on? Like, let's look at all the calls for service, the amount of time we spend, how much of it is social issues, how much of it is chasing bad guys, how much of it is driving, and create a master's class in what it means to be in law enforcement today. And then when you recruit people with the skill set to fill the bill. We're still going to have to fight people, put handcuffs, and do criminal investigations, crime investigations, and testify. But this job's a hell of a lot different today than it was 30 years ago. I'm probably not equipped to do this stuff. People are not equipped to do this stuff. Not you people, though. So I think that the tools have been beneficial. Technology benefit. I think body-worn cameras are a pleasant surprise. I didn't like them at first, but they clear a lot of deputies of false allegations. They bring a lot of light to circumstances and help us train. Because now you have a real-life reflection of what occurred and we can help you better. But at first I was cynical. But I think we have to get back to just teaching people to better understand how to problem solve. So as a compliment to, what's this lady's name I was saying to? Carla. As a compliment to Carla. When I was in high school and college, I worked in hospitality. And there's no better industry to work in to learn how to solve problems and please people. And at the end of the day, that's what law enforcement is supposed to be, right? We're guardians, we're not warriors. We may have to be warriors at moments, but we're supposed to be guardians every day and make the community a safe place so that when I leave, if you don't know my name, bueno. If I'm the center of your universe, we got a problem. I want you to feel safe at Scottsdale Fashion Square, not because you know there's a bunch of uniforms walking around, but just because we're doing our job so well, safe. If you watch the Suns play and the officials call too many fouls, you're like, oh, it's too efficient. If they officiate it correctly, all you see is the game. We're the officials are supposed to let you enjoy life and not fear for things. So you guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
We want to expose this to your guest of honor.
And I'm going to do the rest of the board. I'll grab one with you, and then I'm going to do the rest of the board. One, this is really weird. Look, stuff like kind of. It's just.
Yeah, I don't.
No, you're fine.
I'll go this way with the flag.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good call. All right, there we go. 1, 2, 3. Got it. Okay. Board.
Are there actual jail-free cards? Or those just a man?
I have VIP rooms in the jail.
Okay, let's put you guys this way, more towards this way, so your face isn't caught in the light projector.
Should we?
There we go.
Oh, look at that.
There we go. I got everybody. So sorry. Right here.
Of course you can.
All right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
And then can we get the rest of the group to come up here? Please, do everybody up for a group photo? Yes, everyone. If you want a group photo, get it out. I know. Do this.